Good morning, everyone. How you doing? Good. Oh, it's a little bright up here. Can hardly see anything. Well, thank you very much for having me here this morning and coming along to hear my talk about engaging executive talent through assessment and development. First thing you might be questioning or asking yourself is, who is Beam Suntory? What does that mean? Well, we are Jim Beam and the Suntory Spirits Company out of Japan. And this has been an extraordinary year of change for our organisation. In January of this year, we announced that Suntory Holdings, a Japanese company with some international subsidiaries, intended to acquire Beam Inc. We had been public on the stock exchange for about 2 years. On the 30th of April of this year, so only 4 months later, we became Beam Suntory. Quite extraordinary to do a deal and an acquisition of that size in such a short amount of time. So as Beam Suntory, we are now the 4th largest spirits company in the world. We employ around 4,000 employees globally. We're about $4 billion in revenue. And we have a really exciting array of brands across multiple categories in the spirit segment, including bourbon, whiskey. We have a series of global whiskies, vodka, rum, gin. We have tequila. We have low-calorie wine. So just about everything you can imagine across a really complex category set. What you may not know, or what you may know about the alcohol industry and about the spirits industry, we are highly regulated, very consolidated from both a supplier and a customer perspective. We're also extremely competitive market. So this has been a real challenge for us from a human capital perspective. And what's most important and what is really the ingredients to winning in our markets is brands and people. So first of all, I want to show you this. At Beam Suntory, this really is the foundation and something that we ground ourselves in, an anchor, if you like, of how we talk about our business. It's what we start with when we talk to employees about anything and just about everything. It's a one-page articulation of our mission, our vision, our values, and our key strategic priorities. And what you may be able to read up there is our priority number 1 is our people. Our people to inspire and lead, our people to deliver extraordinary performance is the number 1 thing that will make us successful in our market. And what more important in our people that we believe is our leaders. And great leaders, we believe, and as I'm sure most of you do, are leaders that can lead people, inspire performance through people, but also can deliver outstanding business results. And this is where I want to then jump off and talk and unpack for you a little bit about how we've been engaging our executive talent through a really unique assessment and development program that we've partnered with an external firm. And I want to tell you the story around that today. So the first initiative that we took a couple of years ago was to create a leadership framework. One thing we recognised was that our leaders seemed to be very confused about what was expected of them in leading people and leading business. They were confused not only for their own performance, but they were confused about what was required as you accelerate and you move up the organisation, what was required to sit at the C-suite. So we, in 2012, took a step back and said, okay, so what is a leader at Beam Suntory? What does that really mean? And working with, and we wanted to really create a common language, a set of words and expectations for leaders that would be commonly used across the organisation, that not only articulated for them what they needed to do in their roles to be successful, but what it meant to be a leader that sat with our executive team and what it was required in order for leaders to continue to progress in their careers. So we developed our Beam Suntory leader framework. And this was very much developed by our leaders and for our leaders, and ultimately culminated in words that were used by our CEO, things that he felt were really important and essentially were the success criteria for leaders across Beam. And they're the 4 things that you can see here. So we said, okay, so we've got a leadership framework, that's great. Now, how do we make that real for people? What do we do with that? And obviously, we all know that the talent management potential out of having a leadership framework like that are endless. But what we wanted to make sure was that this was real for our leaders, and particularly for those most senior leaders in our company, those folks who are sitting in business critical roles, the folks who are making critical business strategy decisions, who are leading large groups of employees. We wanted this to really resonate with them. So we said, okay, how do we do that? We can send everybody on a development program, we can send everybody to far-flung places in the world and have this experience of the leadership framework. But we said, you know what? At this point in people's career, when you get to that senior executive level, what you want more than anything is you want feedback and an assessment on where am I at and how far can I go and how quick can I get there. So we said, well, let's give people that. Let's give them a sense, a grounding of where they are and what their potential is and what then, most critically, do they need to work on to get there. So we decided, okay, let's partner with an external firm because we're not going to do this to ourselves. We're going to partner with somebody who can come in and provide us with a much more objective view of our talent, can look at common themes across our most senior executive group, but also can help us with really great best practice assessment tools in order to deliver to this group. So that was the first thing. The second one up there you can see is we really wanted to shift the succession conversation. And I'm sure like me, you have been to many kind of best practice conferences to talk about succession management and how do you run a succession planning process. Well, I don't know if you've had the experience that I have when you sit in a succession planning meeting with a group of executive leaders and it goes something like this. So the executive stands up, he says, I want to talk about Tom. Tom is great. I love Tom. He's so good. And he gets great business results. He's on fire this year. Tom, he's my guy. He's definitely got some stuff to work on. You know, I think one day he could possibly sit in this chair. Anybody had those kind of very unobjective, non-fact-based conversations in succession planning meetings? Well, I have. So we wanted to change that conversation and say, let's get grounded in fact. Let's get grounded with data that tells us exactly what we have in our leadership bench. And to do this right, we agreed, let's take an 80-20 rule. We are not going to do this for everybody. We are going to focus on those most senior leaders, those executives that are in our most critical business roles. Those folks who are driving business strategy and making decisions every day that impact the bottom line and impact people within, large groups of people within their teams. So that was most definitely our strategy. Let's stick at the top of the house. So we partnered with a fantastic boutique firm here in the Chicago area, the VIA Group. They used to be Corporate Insights years ago. And the reason that we partnered with them was we had agreed that we really needed to it was very important to us who we partnered with. Because we wanted to partner with a firm, a shop that could understand us, get our DNA. Because I can tell the spirits industry is very different to CPG. It's also very different to you know, big multinational companies. There's a diversity and a pace and a freneticism to the industry. And we needed to partner with a firm that really got us. So we partnered with VIA. And the other reason that we partnered with them, because they could do all three of the things that were most important to us. They could assess talent, they could help us with development planning for that talent, and they could also then help us with coaching. So with the two things that we spent a lot of time talking about initially with VIA was, okay, we need to look at our bench. What have we got? Do we have the leaders of the future? What are those critical development questions that we would ask ourselves and ask of our leaders to know that these are the folks that are going to lead our company into the future? So that was the first thing. The second thing was, that became clearer and clearer, is this talent management mantra that we used. Let's focus on fewer roles. Let's make sure we have big, heavy-hitting talent in each of those roles. And let's strive to be better than where we are today. So, with the VIA Group, we then focused on developing out an assessment and development program aimed at that senior group of leaders. The first thing was to say, what does great look like from our leadership framework? What are we striving for? And let's operationalise, let's make that real. The second thing was then developing out a multi-method assessment program tailored at each one of those individuals that would use a series of different assessment tools in order for the person themselves to get some feedback and understand where they have strength and development, but also for us to get a sense of potential and readiness. The third thing that we did was create a very unique, very customised report for each one of these folks that linked back to our leadership framework, but also gave them a very clear sense of their strengths, how they could better leverage their strengths, and what their development areas were, including potential derailers. The fourth thing then was that we had each one of the VIA consultants who had partnered with the person around their assessment to then come back and help them to form out a development plan. I'm sure, again, all of you have had experiences where you do assessments, you do 360s, and the person gets the report and they say, well, that's interesting, thanks very much, and they never look at it again. We said no. In order for this to get, for us as an organisation to get some return on this investment, but also for the individual to get return on the time that they had invested in the process, that development planning, the crispness of each one of those actions that they would take was absolutely critical, that they not only continue to perform and accelerate in their own role, but then also to be ready for that next role. And the fifth thing we did was we have, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about this in just a second, but a blend of both internal and external one-on-one coaching that was available to each one of our executive leaders. So, what's been the two key outcomes of this program? Well, the first is that we have got such a great view now of our senior leadership bench. We have got fact and data that allow us to have a real conversation with our executive team about the potential that sits within that bench, the readiness, and most importantly, where we have gaps and where we then need to go and start augmenting with a more buy strategy from the market. The second outcome has been for the individual themselves. Now, I talked before about huge year for us, challenging year for us in terms of an acquisition. And a lot of these executives at the most senior levels say, okay, so why should I stay? What's in it for me? Where's my career going? Okay, we're now a subsidiary of a big Japanese company. Help me to connect my heart and mind into why be here and why stay. This program has been an enormous retention tool, something that was an added benefit we didn't recognise at the beginning. But this has given our executive leaders such an intense message about our intended investment in them that it's actually been a great retention tool. And folks have said to us time and time again, I feel more valued now having gone through this assessment program, which is hard to hear sometimes about what I'm not good at. But in fact, I feel like you guys care about me enough to take the time for me to help me understand what I'm great at, how I can leverage that more effectively, and what I need to work on. So as much as I'm a big advocate for development experiences and experiential learning programs, this has been a very, very different strategy, but to get at something in a much more targeted and individually specific way. So, what are we focused on now? The first thing, the conversation that we have with our executive team, as I'm sure you do too, is around ROI. What is the return on this enormous financial investment in a relatively small group of leaders? And we've had about 55 leaders go through this program. What's the return on that? So, and you can see some of the key questions we're asking ourselves. Are we really getting the value for money? How do we quantify that? How do we see that? How do we see that in fact and data? And is it truly driving performance and engagement of this group? Well, I can tell you that it's certainly driving engagement. We're seeing high levels of productivity and performance, and particularly through teams of people, not just with the individual themselves. So turning on the light for people that their role is not just about driving the numbers and getting business results, but their role is equally about inspiring and delivering results through teams. So that's been quite extraordinary. And the other added benefit that I talked about is retention, and we've seen only one person within the last 2 years exit out of this group, which is, again, quite extraordinary. The second thing is we have fundamentally changed the succession conversation with our C-suite. That conversation is now far more fact and data driven. And we have representatives from the VIA group sit in on that conversation and provide a perspective on what they see in the individual's results, and also they provide a perspective on progression and readiness and development planning. So it's been a really great way of blending both the leader's feedback on the individual, but also providing some fact and analysis from a much more objective perspective. The third thing that we've done is very much taken that action planning and coaching stage, and we've transferred that from the VIA group to an internal resource. One of the lessons learned out of this process was you can partner with a shop that can provide you coaching and support, and that's great. One of the things that was missing in that for us was having somebody who was part of our organisation, part of our fabric, that could look at some of the consistent themes and things that we look at across all of our global leaders. And it's hard to do that with a consulting group that's not there living it day in, day out. So what we decided a year ago was that we would actually employ our own coaching consultant, internal coaching support, somebody that travels around the world and has, I think, one of the best jobs in our company, candidly, travels around the world coaching executive leaders around what they got out of their assessment report. The gentleman who's in this role does very intense coaching with around 25 executives, but he also touches base consistently with the other 25 executives on how they're progressing and what they're working on. So what he's able to do is pull out some of the threads of information, context, some of those consistent themes, and work with our executive team and our talent management group to say, okay, what would we do if we can see that the majority of our leaders in this group are actually missing strategic thinking, or they're not able to inspire others in a heartfelt way, more authentic leadership? What would we do about that? So it's been really helpful for us then to think about future strategies and development approaches that we might employ in order to get at some of the consistent development themes that we see across our business. So I thank you for having me here this morning again. I really appreciate you listening to my story about what we've done around engaging executive talent. It's been quite a ride for us over the last 3 years, from being spun off from Fortune Brands 3 years ago, having 2 years as a public company, and then being acquired in the 3rd year. It's certainly, as we call it, it's a ride, and being at Beam Suntory is a little bit like living dog years. You know, you're there for 1 and you feel like you've been there for 7. But this has been an incredibly important initiative for us, and our #1 strategic priority from a talent management perspective. Appreciate you hearing me out today, and as I would always end with, cheers.